The battle for the mind of North America will be fought in the video arena.
Good evening, everyone. Welcome. I am beyond thrilled at the number of people that are here tonight. Thank you for blessing my heart, because I was thinking it was going to be me and the boys. And frankly, I've seen them all week, so it's not that exciting. The bathrooms are located over there. The exits have the big red signs. Like I said before, there's coffee and water. If the coffee cups run out, there's more under the table. The membership and the intent to say yes pledge things are at the back. Feel free to ask questions of any of those people there, or I am here, and my friend Lynn is at the very, very back, and she's in a white blazer. Feel she is well informed of what goes on here too. So at EPP, we start out our meetings with prayer. I don't know if everybody does it, but it's in the manual. So my friend who lives not that far from me wrote this and sent it to me. God, keep Alberta forever in the palm of your hand. As we spread our wings to be all you've created us to be, may we stay forever free. Help us to serve each other in a way that brings honor and glory to you. When we wander and become self-seeking, I pray you will guide us back to the truth and the light that sets us free. We were born for such a time as this, and I ask for the strength and wisdom we need to move mountains, people, and obstacles that stand in the way of Alberta being all you created it to be. Your word says, seek ye first the kingdom of God, and everything else will be added. Show us the way to do this. Make it clear. Provide godly leaders to lead Alberta in a way that brings honor and glory to you in everything we do. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen. Some of you may recognize the name of the author, Lois Beale. I didn't tell that to every place I've been because nobody would know. So tonight we have two speakers, and we ask during the presentations no questions because there will be a Q&A at the end. We're also asking for no disruptions because we're here for polite conversation and exchange of information. I will say who I am. My name is Patty Vold. Some of you have already asked if I'm related to and I will say yes. But the only rodeos I do are in the back pasture accidentally. We go to the auction market on Wednesdays, pick up the check on Thursdays, and we don't golf. So that pretty much covers that. I am a mom of 9, grandma of 14, one of who is 2 weeks old, and the other one just turned 20. So you can pick up the ages in between. We farm east of Ponoka, and we also farm in north of Luceland, Saskatchewan, where our oldest son lives. My husband is third generation on the farm, and I have kids that are 5th generation living at Grandma and Grandpa's house. So we're kind of solidly here. So tonight, our Alberta Prosperity Project is a nonpartisan, not-for-profit educational society. Our mission is to educate, inspire, and advocate for all Albertans about the benefits of freedom and prosperity through independence. This movement began in May 2021 in a humble oil field shop in Nisku, Alberta, where a group of Albertans, tired of the inefficiencies of our provincial leadership and the overreach from Ottawa, decided it was time to act. Out of those humble beginnings, the Alberta Prosperity Project was born, and here we are today. Our first speaker tonight is, Dennis, where were you born? In Camrose. So he's not too far from his birthplace, and he's lived in Alberta his whole life, probably except for some education. He's a cardiothoracic surgeon and a critical care specialist who started and directed Western Canada's first heart and lung transplantation program. During his 32 years in practice, he also served on the Finance Committee of successful provincial Conservative governments since the Getty era. He is a founding member and chair of the Alberta Prosperity Society/Project. He is a fiscal conservative, student of the Canadian Constitution, and is here to speak to us on the benefits of provincial sovereignty. Please welcome Dr. Dennis Modry.
Thank you, Patty, and thank you. Wow, what a great crowd tonight. Thanks, everybody, for coming. It's wonderful to see you all here. Now, before I begin, we're going to show a brief video, and wherever Wade is, can we get the lights? Just by way of background to this video, some of you may have seen it, but this will be for everybody anyhow. This was produced by a guy by the name of Jim Ferguson, and you will see him in a second. And he's from Scotland, and he started an organization called Freedom Train International. And this video was created just for Alberta. And we had no idea it was coming, so it was unique. And the singer is James Kersey from Texas. But the key point is that he makes is that freedom-loving people around the world are looking at what's happening here in Alberta, and they want us to be successful as a beacon of light and hope for them as well. So without further ado, let's show the video.
The die is set, but Alberta ain't ready to kneel just yet. They chose their king, their power was met, but we don't answer to Ottawa yet. No crown gave us what we've earned, just dirt and fire and lessons learned. Now the ground it shakes, the steel it groans, and Alberta walks alone. We ride sovereign steel through fire, through
All righty. Well, I'm going to start off the way I have for the last couple of events, and this is about our 45th or 46th in the last several weeks. Put about 20,000 kilometers on my car, so we've been all over the province, and we're going to keep doing it until we win. But before I begin, what I'd like to do is just give a shout out to the many volunteers, because we couldn't put these events on if it wasn't for them. So please give them a warm round of appreciation. So in the words of the famous actress Elizabeth Taylor to her seventh husband, I won't keep you long. But probably about 30 minutes, could be 35. We'll see how things go. How many people here this evening are at an Alberta Prosperity Project event for the first time? Raise your hand. Wonderful, wonderful. Okay, it looks like just about half the audience. So, and that's something that we've seen at most of the venues. You know, half to 2/3, sometimes 3/4 of the audience are people that hadn't been to an event before. So the point is that the movement is growing, and it's growing rapidly. And the amount of international attention we've had and the international media that have come to our venues is really, really quite remarkable. How many people here already are on the independence train? Okay, and how many people here are here for information and haven't quite made a decision yet? Wonderful, wonderful. Now, I should point out that there's two categories of people in relation to the federal election, which is my next question. How many people here are pleased with the outcome of the recent federal election? Okay, and there are some. Okay, and that's good. I like that, because there's two reasons for it. One is that you're really genuinely happy about the outcome because you like big government, big control, and high taxes and limited freedoms. And that's okay. There are people that like that sort of thing. And so no criticism there. But then there's another group of people that are happy with the outcome of the federal election for the simple reason that they knew it would stimulate the sovereignty movement. So I'm not sure what camp the people are in who raised their hand, but it's interesting to think about. All right. So when you look at the outcome of the recent federal election, what do you see? You see something very unique. You see that Saskatchewan, Alberta, Central and Northern BC didn't vote the way the rest of the country voted, right? And what we see with just about every federal election is that it's over at the Manitoba-Ontario border, right? Now, you have to ask the question, why is that? And it's very simple. We have a different culture and a different value set here than much of the rest of the country. And speaking of values, was anybody pleased with the former Liberal government's values under Trudeau? Is anybody more concerned about Mr. Carney than Mr. Trudeau? And for good reason. He's far better educated. He's far more accomplished. He's very much more persuasive because of the circles that he has found himself in as the, governor of the Bank of Canada and the Bank of England. But you're right, he's far more dangerous to us as well. And Trudeau has set the stage. They're related. I don't know if you know that, but they are related by marriage, I understand. How many people have read his book, Values? There are some interesting points from his book, and I'm going to share some of these points with you now because I want you to think about, do his values align with your values, all right? So this is what he says. Western civilization is morally rotten, corrupted by capitalism. And it's interesting to think, well, capitalism has lifted more people out of poverty than anything else. But corrupted by capitalism, which has led to a climate emergency, right? And he says, to deal with this, there must be rigid controls, not just controls, rigid controls on personal freedoms. Anybody remember what that's like during COVID? So there must be rigid controls on personal freedoms, business. Now, what kind of business? Business related to the oil and gas industry and agriculture. Rigid controls on agriculture and on financial institutions that finance those businesses. And he goes on to say that I do not promise that life will get better for ordinary people. Now, when he says ordinary people, I find that maddening because I consider myself an ordinary person, but what does he think he is then? Obviously not an ordinary person. Life will not be better for ordinary people. In fact, there will be far fewer choices, less travel, less meat. Think of COVID and the mandates. More inconvenience and more poverty. And we're seeing that right now, aren't we, with the cost of living, and nobody's wages are doubling, but the cost of living has doubled or tripled. And it goes on to say that he admits that assets will be stranded. And what he means by that is businesses related to oil and gas and agriculture are going to be compromised. They're going to go belly up. And the people that are involved in those industries may well lose their homes. In addition, he talks about internal combustion engine vehicles. And he says those will be stranded. They'll become unsaleable. And we know that's going to happen because what is their plan? We already know that next year, the automotive industry has to ensure that 20% of their sales are electric vehicles. By 2030, it has to be 60%, and by 2035, it has to be 100%. How does that make you all feel? In addition to that, you could ask the question, well, how is he going to achieve these objectives? What is he a fan of? Well, he's a fan of censorship, for one thing, so that you will only get one narrative, right? And that'll be the narrative from the mainstream media. He's taken steps already to compromise independent media through the Online Harms Act and the Online Streaming Act, although Trump may have something. I think he may have just changed his mind on the Online Streaming Act, which if he actually has done that, that would really help independent media. But more than that, as a prominent member of the World Economic Forum, he is advocating for a digital ID. That digital ID will be assigned to everybody and will track where you are at any point in time to control you. He also wants to implement a digital currency, a central bank digital currency. And that will then give him the ability not only to control you, where you can go, etc., but what you can buy, because he can control your accounts. And it'll be a lot easier for the federal government with the central bank digital currency to do that than it was during the trucker convoy when people had their accounts frozen. Okay? So this is the sort of dystopian future that he is looking to implement. And because he is a climate zealot, then he's very much in favor of controlling you through environmental, social, and governance metrics. So if you don't follow the dictates in terms of his environmental, social, and governance wishes, and legislation likely as well, then you can be compromised not just in travel, but in what you are able to buy as well. And so, moving on from there, Trudeau has set the stage for the next step, and that is so that the Liberal government, the socialist, Marxist sort of thinking, can be perpetuated indefinitely. And how is he going to achieve that? By hollowing out the middle class. And that's happening already. But the next step is to lower the voting age to 16. Now, I've got no issue with very bright young people who are 16, but they don't have a world experience yet. At least when you're 18, you have learned a little bit more, and you can serve in the military, and so you should have the right to vote. But the companion to lowering the voting age to 16 is that by the time you're 17, you will qualify now for $2,000 a month as a 17-year-old in the proposed Universal Basic Income Plan. And what does that do to a young person? Gee, I've got $2,000 a month. I don't feel like I need to get any more education right now. I'm not going to bother learning a skill or a trade. I'll wait. Well, this is how you prevent young people from taking over because they won't be able to. They won't have the skill or the trade or the knowledge to be able to deal with the elites. So you're going to have a permanent underclass that will look after the elites. That is the intention, and that's right out of the WEF playbook. It sounds like a conspiracy theory, but you know the interesting thing about all of this, if they tell you what they're going to do and then they do it, believe it, because it's happening right now. All right, so the question then is now, well, what can we really do about this? And you know, I've studied this for quite some time, and I've looked at Alberta's history in detail. I've looked at the Constitution, and at one time, a number of years ago, I thought, we can fix Confederation. But I can assure you right now we can't, and I'm going to tell you why as we move forward. That there is only one solution. If you want to fix this country, I'm talking about Alberta. If you want a change in this province, there is only one solution, and that is for Alberta to become a sovereign country, because that's the leverage that we need to control our destiny. Let me talk about that term sovereign for 1 second here. Ostensibly, we know what it means. It's self-governance, freedom from external interference. Importantly, understand that it is not a left or a right issue politically. It's pragmatic. It does mean freedom from external interference, but let's put some meat on those bones. It's freedom from persecution. And when I say freedom from persecution, what do I mean by that? It's freedom from political persecution, economic persecution, cultural persecution, religious persecution, and regulatory persecution. And you might recognize, if you think about each of these areas, that you may feel as though in some of those areas you have been persecuted or compromised, if you will. Now, let me say something about sovereignty that, from a different perspective, that you might never have thought of before. Consider each one of you as a sovereign individual. And sovereign really means there's nothing above you. So, for example, there's nothing above God, as an example. As a sovereign individual, when you have zero regulation and zero taxation, you are actually free to do what you want. When you are over-regulated, you are now being controlled. You are prevented in many ways from doing what you want to be able to do, to better yourself, better your family, better your life. When you are taxed, you are giving up your wealth that then prevents you to purchase the goods and services that you want for yourself, your family, for your grandchildren, and future generations. So the more you're taxed, the more sovereignty, individual sovereignty you lose. The more you're regulated, the more sovereignty you lose. Let's look at sovereignty from the provincial government perspective. You'll all recall, perhaps, when the UCP government was elected, they introduced Bill 1. That was the Alberta Sovereignty within a United Canada Act. Why did they do that? They did that because they were frustrated with the federal government overreach of provincial constitutional authority in so many areas. Right? And so this was an idea that would give the provincial government the teeth it needed to deal with the federal government. And how has this worked out? Well, not so well. Let me give you an example. There are some 18 lawsuits that have been filed against the federal government by the provincial government in multiple areas. in oil and gas, development and transportation, agriculture, censorship, and property rights. How many people here know who David Lametti is? Some of you do. So he was the Minister of Justice in Justin Trudeau's cabinet. And he made the point, and it's true, Canadians do not have the right to own property. Did you know that? You don't have the right to own property. And firearms is property. And they're coming after it. And if they can come after your firearms, they can come after anything. And your home and your land, if you don't pay your taxes, you'll find out who owns it. Now, just to give you a little hint of the future as a sovereign country, we could eliminate taxation. So, in other words, as a sovereign country, there would be no federal regulations and no federal taxation. Under that circumstance, what would happen? If you're making $100,000 a year and your average taxation is 48%, now, because that's what the Fraser Institute has stated, in a sovereign country, your take-home pay would be $90,000 to $92,000. Very different. And you pay no taxes on that because you paid 8 or 10%. That would be maximal. No income tax, and in a few years, no property tax. Then you would really own your property. Now, how did we get into this mess? Let's touch on this for a moment. Because a lot of people don't really know why we are being subjugated and dominated and exploited and our self-determination inhibited. So let's understand how this all started now. Alberta and Saskatchewan were incorporated into Canada September 1, 1905, right? And that was due to the efforts of Sir Clifford Sifton. He was the Minister of the Interior in the Liberal government of Sir Wilfrid Laurier. But it's what he said in 1904, before Alberta and Saskatchewan joined, that was prescient. And if you understand what he said then, you'll understand why we are in the situation we are now. So I'm going to tell you what he said to an audience in Winnipeg in 1904. This is out of his book, Clifford Sifton, Volume 2, page 95. He said, and I quote, "We desire, and all Canadian patriots desire." Now, Canadian patriots in 1904 were predominantly the people living in the East. So we desire, and all Canadian patriots desire, that the great trade of the prairies, that's Alberta and Saskatchewan's wealth, that the great trade of the prairies shall go to enrich our people in the East, to build up our factories and our places of work, and in every legitimate way contribute to its prosperity. Nothing there about the West, or the prairies in particular, and nowhere in his book do you see that. So we started off as a colony to serve the interests of the East, and here it is 120 years later, and we're still being pillaged and plundered for our wealth, and we're having values shoved down our throat that don't align with our values here in the West. Now, everything was planned to work out exactly the way it is. So let's understand the form of government that was implemented at the federal level. Think of the House of Commons, the Senate, and the Supreme Court. So, the House of Commons, we do not have representation by population, which is supposed to be the case, but we don't. Example, Prince Edward Island elects 1 MP for every 39,000 population. Alberta elects 1 MP, member of parliament, for every 130,000 population. And every other province is in between. Okay? So we have the worst deal of all. No better in the Senate. In the Senate, for example, Alberta and BC have 25% of the population, 11% of the Senate seats. Mitch will show you a slide that puts it in even clearer detail. And the Supreme Court is relevant here as well because there are 9 justices. They're all appointed from the Prime Minister's office. 3 come from Quebec, 3 from Ontario, 1 from the Maritimes, and 2 from all of the West. So when there's a court case and it's adjudicating federal provincial jurisdiction, how do you think the Supreme Court is going to rule? In favor of Alberta and Saskatchewan? Not likely. Here's a recent example. You'll remember Bill C-69. Miraculously, the Supreme Court actually voted in favor of Alberta and Saskatchewan's position that Bill C-69 should be eliminated. What has happened? The federal government has refused to adhere to that Supreme Court ruling. So you can't even win at the level of the Supreme Court. We can't win in the House of Commons, we can't win in the Senate, we can't win with the Supreme Court, and we can't win an election. Now, how is this played out economically? Well, if you look at equalization, the national energy policy, other federal confiscatory tax policy, and regulatory costs, federal regulatory costs, you don't even think about those other taxes and costs, regulatory costs rather. But we've given over $800 billion to Ottawa, not received a cent in return. Let's touch on the national energy policy for a second. How many people here were adversely affected by the national energy policy in 1980? Okay, there are a number of people. A lot of people don't remember exactly what was going on, but just a little history. In the 70s, Alberta was booming. There was a massive demographic shift of people and businesses coming to Alberta. All 5 major banks were moving their head offices to Calgary, and one did, CIBC, for a few years. And why not? Liquid gold, oil. Now, what happened after the 1980 national energy policy? Alberta was devastated. People lost their businesses moved out of the province, people lost their homes, people committed suicide. It was a mess for the next 15, 16 years. Did Ottawa care? No, they didn't. Now, the brainchild behind the national energy policy was Marc Lalonde. He was the Minister of Finance in the Pierre Elliott Trudeau government. When asked a few years after the national energy policy, why did he implement the national energy policy? He said these words: "We could not let Alberta become the center of economic power in Canada." Think of that in relation to what Clifford Sitton said in 1904. Ladies and gentlemen, the East will never give up power and control unless we take it for ourselves. They will never give it up. And there was something else that was going on in 1980, and that was the first Quebec secession referendum, right? And at that time, the federal government advising the Quebec government, look, we'll introduce a national energy policy, we'll change the formula on equalization, so you'll stay in Canada. So in other words, Quebec gets 2 of every $3 of equalization now, and that is to buy Quebec's loyalty to Canada with our money. Okay, so they get about $14 billion a year, and we give that amount every year. So now beyond that, because we can't get our oil and gas to international markets, we're losing $26.5 billion a year, according to the Frontier Center for Public Policy out of Winnipeg in their research report. The Premier herself has said, we've lost $500 billion of planned investment in the last several years. The Canadian Taxpayers Federation determines that it's closer to $750 billion in the last several years. But that investment did not occur in Alberta, and it didn't occur in Alberta because the people and businesses that would have made those investments couldn't see a business case. Why? Federal regulation and taxation. That's why. But that money was invested elsewhere. It just wasn't invested in Alberta. Had it been invested in Alberta, through the multiplier of effect, that would have generated trillions of dollars of increased economic activity, not just in Alberta, but throughout Canada. And this has not occurred, and again, it's because of federal regulation and taxation. So let's look at this on a global scale. If you examine, and there's a report that's come out, economic growth in all industrialized countries in the world, okay? Canada is dead last. So economic growth in Canada is dead last compared to all other industrialized nations in the world. Why? Same thing. Federal regulation and taxation. This is what we've been dealing with, folks. So from that, you can see in the last 120 years, we've been pillaged and plundered, and it's only getting worse. And when I say it's only getting worse, think of this. The Conference Board of Canada was commissioned by the Alberta government in 2023 to look at what would happen to Alberta as a result of the emissions cap that the federal government is planning to implement. Between 2030 and 2050, they estimate that Alberta will lose nearly $1 trillion of economic investment, and that the revenue to the Alberta government will be down at least $180 billion and $100 billion in the first 4 years. And every family's income and purchasing power will be reduced by several $1,000s as well, on top of all of the inflation that's occurring. So this is from the Conference Board of Canada. And what's interesting about it is that not all of the data has come forward yet. It had to be derived through a Freedom of Information request. So there's more information there, but we actually think that it could be much worse than those preliminary numbers that were released. So let me ask you a question now. How many people here think that it's possible to do what the Premier wants, that this outcome could occur? Remember, after Carney was elected, Premier Smith and Mr. Carney met, and the Premier made 9 demands, right? They were all in relation to oil and gas, and one was single-use plastics. And she said at the time, if we don't get these things, that's going to be a threat to national unity, right? That's what she said. What can that mean, a threat to national unity? It can only mean one thing, right? Alberta leaves if we don't get what we want. Anybody think that she's going to get any of those 9 things? All right, let's look at what the Alberta Next panel is doing now. The Alberta Next panel has released a document, and that document outlines 8 constitutional changes that they are asking for. Does anybody think that we can open and change the Constitution? So nobody thinks we can open and change the Constitution. Because for a lot of people who aren't on the sovereignty train yet, they think that we can do that. They think it's possible. Let's look at what has really happened. Think of the 2021 referendum on ending equalization. That would have required, to end equalization, it would require opening the Constitution and changing it. All right? So 62% of Albertans voted to end equalization. Nothing happened? Why? Because nothing could happen. There are 4 barriers, plus 1, to change the Constitution. And I'm going to tell you what they are so that when you're talking to your friends, family, and colleagues and skeptics, if you can talk to them even, you can tell them this. If you want to do anything that's meaningful for Alberta, that is a necessity to change the Constitution. Okay, so here it goes. The first hurdle to open and change the Constitution, and we'll use equalization as an example to end equalization, you have to have 7 of 10 provincial legislatures, so that's 7 of 10 provincial legislatures representing 50% of the population agreeing to open the Constitution and change it for anything. Second, that's the first hurdle. The second hurdle is you have to have a majority vote in the House of Commons to change the Constitution. We don't have representation by population there. So how are the interests of the West going to be reflected through the House of Commons? Then the third hurdle is you have to have a majority vote in the Senate. We don't have representation there that's enough to do anything. And then the fourth hurdle is Quebec has a de facto veto on constitutional change, despite the fact that they never even signed the 1982 Constitution Act. And then finally, and I've touched on this already, if 1 in a quadrillion chance, okay, and that could be an underestimate, 1 in a quadrillion chance that you got through the first 4 hurdles and there was still a constitutional question between the province of Alberta and Saskatchewan, say, and the federal government, it would be decided by the Supreme Court. So you see the picture. Now, when I asked the question, does anybody think we can open and change the Constitution, nobody raised their hand. Is that the same now? Does anybody think it's possible? No, right, it is impossible. So it takes us to the point, well, what do we do? Where can we have leverage? Because there's an imbalance in power between the federal government and the provincial governments. But Quebec is somewhere up here. Federal government, Quebec, the rest of the provinces. The only leverage that we could ever get is the leverage that comes from a successful referendum on Alberta sovereignty. There is nothing else that can achieve the objectives of preserving our culture here in the West, preserving the family as the centerpiece of society, to pass on values and critical thinking, education, etc., to their kids and future generations, and to have an economic future. There is nothing else that can work. So how do we get there then? What's the process? Does anybody understand the Clarity Act? Has anybody heard about the Clarity Act? All right, I don't see any hands raised, but I'm sure that there are some people know a little bit about the Clarity Act. But the Clarity Act defines the legal pathway for a province to leave Canada, okay? The legal pathway. And how did the Clarity Act come about? Well, following the 1995 Quebec referendum to leave, and it missed by a fraction of a percentage point, the federal government subsequently posed the question, does a province have the unilateral right to leave Canada, the unilateral right to declare its independence? And they referred the question, and it's called the Quebec Secession Reference, to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court did a lengthy analysis of what happened around the world where regions of people within a larger country decided that they wanted to leave, and came out with this analysis. And from that analysis, the federal government proposed legislation called the Clarity Act. And that legal pathway has 3 main criteria for a province to leave. The first criteria is that there has to be a clear question in a referendum posed to the electorate in Alberta, say. Second, there has to be a clear outcome. Well, in democracy, a clear outcome is 50% plus 1. And third, you have to have demonstrated that you've had consultation with other interested parties, such as other political parties, such as First Nations, Métis, etc. So that is the legal pathway for a province to leave. So here's the nuts and bolts of where we are now. We've posed a question, Mitch has posed the question to Elections Alberta. And that question is, do you agree that the province of Alberta shall become a sovereign country and cease to be a province of Canada? That's the question. And the Chief Electoral Officer has wondered whether or not the question, he didn't take a position on it, but he wondered whether it would abridge the sections 1 to 35.1 of the Constitution. We don't believe that it does, but it was referred to the court. We're waiting for a court process to define that. And in that court process, the provincial government is aligned with our legal team as well, because they want our question to go forward. Our question is a constitutional question. All right? So let's assume then that the Chief Electoral Officer permits the question to go forward, ultimately. And that's going to take about another 3 months. So then we're in a situation where what we have to do is collect 177,000 signatures on a petition, okay, on a petition that then goes to the Chief Electoral Officer for validation. And once validated, the petition, the valid petition outcome, then goes to the provincial government, and the provincial government is obligated in the Citizens Initiative Act to hold a referendum on Alberta sovereignty, which we expect will occur in 2026. Now, we know that we can easily achieve the petition numbers. We have 120 days to collect signatures of 177,000 people, but we have over 250,000 people registered with the Alberta Prosperity Project right now. So we have the contact information, and I like to say it's a cakewalk to get the signatures, but that's because I'm not doing it. We have 20,000 volunteers and about 100 regional leaders and chapter leaders in the various regions around the province that will collect those petition signatures that we require. And then, once that is done and the Chief Electoral Officer validates them, then the petition goes to the provincial government, and the provincial government, like I say, is obligated to hold a referendum. And then, as far as the referendum is concerned, we need to continue working and growing prior to the referendum so we're assured that we can win it. Now, there will be about 2.9 million voters that will vote for the referendum, will vote in the referendum. And we're going to need about 1.6, 1.7, and preferably 1.8 million people voting in favor of Alberta sovereignty. Let's now assume that the referendum is successful. What happens then? Well, under those circumstances, what happens is that the Premier, once the votes are counted in the referendum, she is able to come to the public and she can say, citizens of Alberta, we've just been acknowledged by other countries, such as the U.S., that we have had a successful referendum. They recognize our successful referendum, and therefore today I declare that Alberta is a sovereign country. And now the negotiations that take place are the negotiations of secession itself. What happens to the debt? What happens to the military? What happens to borders? What happens to et cetera, et cetera? You see what I'm saying? Now, we've drafted a document. It's called the Value of Freedom document. Some of you may have seen it. I think there are some copies in the back. It's also on our website, so you can read it online or download it yourself, which evaluates what Alberta's circumstances are right now and what they would be in a sovereign country when we take over everything that the federal government is now doing for us and not doing for us. And in a nutshell, I can tell you that we give about $70 to $75 billion a year through federal taxation and regulatory costs and other hidden taxes that you don't even see, but Mitch is going to show you what those are. And we get back about 25 to 30 billion, okay? And they keep the rest. The federal government keeps the rest to buy votes in subsequent elections, to engender cultural advertising that don't align with our values, and to pay for foreign aid. And wait till you see the kind of things that are being paid for by the federal government. This will not make you happy, folks, and Mitch will show you that. But we would be able to keep that surplus. So we'd keep all of the 75 billion right here. With that, that's how we get rid of provincial income tax. That's how we reduce the many other taxes that you are now paying. All right? So it's a fantastic future for us as a sovereign country. I'm going to end off now with two questions. And they're kind of fun. This is the two questions that I posed to Ralph Klein in 2003. And Ralph was a good friend of mine. And I'm talking with him in January 2003 at the annual general meeting of the Provincial Government Conservative Party. And I said to Ralph, and I want you all to be Ralph tonight, okay? And I want you to answer the question before I tell you what Ralph said, okay? So here it goes, Ralph. I said, you know, Ralph, I've got an idea. I think I know how we can fix the dysfunctional relationship between Alberta and Ottawa, between you and Mr. Chrétien. And he looked at me and he says, you do? And I says, yeah. Would you like to hear about it? And he said, absolutely. And I said, well, okay, the algorithm here is based on this question. Are you ready for it, Ralph? Okay, here's the question. If you were the president or the prime minister of the sovereign country of Alberta, and Canada came to you and said, we would like Alberta to join Confederation under the current terms and cost of membership, would you? Ralph, would you? No. All right. Here's the important question now. If you said no to that, then, just like I said to Ralph, I said, do you then not think that you have a moral and an ethical and an economic responsibility to Albertans to fix this dysfunctional relationship? What do you say, Ralph? That's not exactly what he said, but here's what he said. He said, to ask the question is to know the answer. Of course not. And so I said, okay, well, I'm working on a document that will define the algorithm of how to do this. Okay, so I drafted this document. It was entitled Alberta at the Crossroads. Status quo, nothing changes. Refederation, we fix our circumstances within Canada. Autonomy. At that time in my mind, autonomy meant sovereignty or independence. And then I met with Ralph in his office in August of 2003 after running that document through dozens and dozens of different people, former members of parliament like Don Mazinkowski, who is also a friend of mine, prominent MLAs such as Ted Morton, Steve Smith, Gary Marr, academics, Jerry Shapur, a constitutional lawyer, and many other professionals and non-professionals as well. Presented it to Ralph, spent an hour and a half with him that day in August, and he asked me a question. He said, would you like to present this to caucus? And I said, sure. I went away, worked with my secretary on a PowerPoint presentation. A few weeks later, I got a call from the chief of staff saying, you're not going to be able to present to caucus. And I said, well, why is that? And he said, your document is about separation. And I said, no, it isn't. It's about leverage. The leverage that your government doesn't have, because you cannot make the changes that you want, because you don't have the leverage. This is the only thing that will give you that leverage. So with that, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your attention. I look forward to the Q&A. And now you will be regaled with some hard data from Mitch Sylvestre.
Thank you, Dr. Dennis Modry. So now the CEO of Alberta Prosperity Project. I've been very busy. Not that these guys haven't been, but Mitch Sylvestre, the owner-operator of Sylvestre Sporting Goods, a well-established store since 1989. Mitch is actively involved in political advocacy. He chairs the Alberta First Pension Plan Initiative and is the CEO of the Alberta Prosperity Project. Mitch is an advocate for the people and speaks with honesty and integrity. Please welcome Mitch Sylvestre. But before he comes up, so you can clap for him, but this organization runs on donations. And I saw a thing that the left put out, or whoever put out, that we were going to get $500 million once it got to the referendum. It's a lie. So, donation buckets are going around. Please be generous, because it runs on donations. Any of that printing stuff is paid for by you people. It's kind of like taxes. But it's not, because it's voluntary. I've known Mitch for quite a while. He is honest and trustworthy. I met him first time before an AGM, and I had friends that needed money to go. They had run out of money, but they really wanted to go. One of the daughter actually sits on a CA now, and a friend of mine took me over, and Mitch handed me $300. He didn't know who I was, but he trusted that the people that sent me to him were trustworthy, and he trusts people who are trustworthy. He is trustworthy. So, my friend, Mitch Sylvestre.
That's so kind. Thank you very much. Every night I come and, before I get started, I think, what's going to be the thing that's going to get everybody moving? And here's the way I see this. This is my job. Since I started in politics, my biggest problem is getting conservatives together and getting moving in a direction, all in the same direction, because herding conservatives is like herding cats. Everybody's strong-willed, everybody's running their own world, and everybody has a very strong opinion on the way things got to be. So I haven't started that. I've been doing it for 3 years. I find it's difficult, but we've been fairly successful doing it. But the reason that I think we can get everybody moving in the same path is there's a couple reasons, but money is a very important one. So I just want to share with you, at the grassroots level, simply, we got the Value of Freedom document built. It was a very big thing for me as CEO of APP to get that document built so that people would understand that this is really about money and how much money we're actually losing and how much money we're going to actually gain by becoming an independent Alberta, because it's important. In reality, you're going to get probably really about 40% increase in pay day one. So, but we're saying 20 to 25. And the reason we're saying 20 to 25 because it's still a lot of money. On $100,000, it's $2,000 a month more that belongs to you. Right now, the way it's sitting, everybody says, and I can attest to that you're paying between 42 and 48% tax on your paycheck. That's a lot. That's more than anybody has ever paid in history without going to war. They used to pay the slaves. They used to take 20% from the slaves. That's, honest to God, funny fact, but that's the way it was. So where does that put us? So what I'm trying to say to you is this is a fight about money. This is about your sovereignty. It's about the ability of you to keep more money in your pocket or give it to the federal government. Those are the choices. How hard do you want to work for that extra 25%? Because that's what it's going to take. I need every single one in the room to become a disciple. I need every single person in the room to talk to their friends, because that's what it's going to take. We need 1.5 million votes. And you know what? I want to know where those people live before the election. Because we want to go talk to them and make sure they vote. Because this is the most important political decision you'll ever make. As a matter of fact, it's probably one of the most important business decisions you'll ever make too. Because the sad part about this whole situation and moving into where we're going is it's not going to get any better And I really believe, and I don't know if any of you agree with us, but we're right in the middle of a recession right now. Unemployment rate's about 8%. You know, the definition of a recession is 2 quarters in a row with lower GDP than before. And we're at least there. So if any of you don't believe that, you're not in business. I've been in business for 47 or 48 years. And, you know, I mean, we see how many people come in, how much money is spent. And you get a feel for it. You know, you just understand it. I'm in a retail business, so we have regular traffic, and if people don't have any disposable income, then we don't see them. So what I'm saying to you is, we're in a crisis situation, and I'm going to prove it to you by what I'm going to show you today. And I'm sure a lot of you know some of this information, but if you put it all together, it's pretty scary. And it's hard to listen to. And people get up and leave because they get mad at the fact that this can't possibly be happening. But that doesn't change the fact of whether it's happening or not. And that's where we're at. So, you know what? A lot of this I'm going to be preaching to the converted. But let's start here. When plunder becomes a way of life for a group of men in a society, over the course of time, they create for themselves a legal system that authorizes it, that makes it legal, and a moral code that glorifies it. So what we have happening right now, and I'm saying this out loud, is our federal government is plundering the treasury. And we have the ability to stop that from happening. And the only way that we can stop that from happening is to actually get away from that system. Because we can't convict these people. Because they're above the law, and we see that. And we'll continue, and I'll show you that. And this is the attitude of the people that we're talking about. Those are the elbows up people. Those are the people that we're supposed to be on the same side as. Those are the people that we're supposed to preserve Canada so they can continue to do to us what they're doing now. And the funny part about it is that we all know that if they wanted to change this, they would just have to make some very basic changes to the plan that they have, and everything would be fine. But that would mean that they would not have as much money to spend at the end. So if we think it's no more complicated than that, that's exactly what this whole fight is all about. We have people in power that are abusing us, and we have to understand that we're either going to understand and let them keep doing it, or at least get into a better position so that we can make them stop. What's at stake? The richest piece of real estate in the world. And we have to be very naive to believe that other governments and other people would not want this. And as we get further into this presentation, it will become very obvious how very rich we actually are. We have minerals, we have agriculture. It's an amazement. Last year, I had to drive to the U.S., and I had to drive from Bonnyville, which is kind of northeastern Alberta, all the way down to the U.S. in the middle of harvest. And all those combines were in the field, all those trucks were in the field, and it was hundreds and hundreds of miles of that. Because I drove through the south, the flat south, and those fields that are 2 miles long, and everybody was working, and it was just amazing to me. And I kind of live in farming country, but to see it on the scale that I saw that on that trip was absolutely an amazement to me, just to see the vastness of it and how much there was. But anyway, so we have oil and gas. We're the 3rd or 4th largest producing oil and gas nation in the world. Alberta produces 87% of Canada's oil. 87%. So just understand that number that we go through. I'm going to show you a video about oil barrels per day, who produces it, and it's going to be very interesting to you, I hope. Okay, so here's the deal. I'm going to show you some slides so you can visualize it. All right? So you notice Alberta's net contribution to Ottawa, which is more than $244 billion from 2007 to 2022. Look at Alberta's number compared to everybody else. That's the key here. Comparatively speaking, is this fair for Alberta? We contribute $244 billion. And let's contrast that to the very end, where we've got Quebec, which is receiving $327 billion. And why is that? I don't know. Does anybody in the room know why Quebec should be getting $327 billion and we should be giving them $244 and everything that we earn on the backs of our people? And you know what? We work more than them. I'm telling you that for sure. That's a fact. I'll get into that in a minute. But the whole thing is that the next, Ontario, the biggest economy in Canada, only contributes $41 billion in 15 years. So they've got it figured out. You know, $3-4 billion a year to the government, and we're at 244. So we're a cash cow. That's always been the case. Have you remember seeing that cow being milked? And that's done in the 30s where we produce it all and the East takes it all? Well, that hasn't changed. Okay, so we're going to talk about Canada Pension now, because I did 100 pension town halls. I want you to understand something. You will not lose your pension if we become independent. You can retain your Canadian citizenship. Currently has 3 passports. As a Canadian citizen, if you worked and you paid into CPP, it's legally, they have to pay you. That's all there is to it. No matter where you live, whether it's in a free Alberta, whether it's in Panama, whether it's in the US, whether it's in the USSR, they have to pay you. It's legal, that's the way it is. But let me tell you something about Alberta pension. We pay $9 billion a year to CPP. Our seniors collect $6 billion a year. There's a $3 billion a year overage. According to the CPP Act, that $3 billion overage goes into a fund for the people of Alberta, as a pension fund for the people of Alberta. Now that's a very important thing to remember. Ontario, back in the day, said that's what they wanted because they didn't want to pay more than their share. So that $3 billion plus interest every year since the 1960s means that the federal government owes Alberta pensioners $400 billion. $400 billion, and that's a fact. So what I'm telling you is, Bill Morneau did that, and he wrote the LifeWorks report, and you can look for it. It's on our website. And that was 2 years ago, and it said 2 years ago that they owe us $335 billion. And that's an actuarial report. These guys are embarrassed if they're wrong. This is a very important thing to an actuary to be able to give you precise, exact numbers. Okay? It's a matter of pride. And the other thing is that Trudeau got more actuarial firms to do the study, and they came up with the same number. But the government doesn't want to pay us that, of course, because you understand that. We are talking about 60 years, 65 years actually, of pension guaranteed for the money that they owe us, sitting in a fund, and we wouldn't have to collect another penny from our workers, or that wouldn't include a penny's interest. Just the interest on that money alone would, in 1 year, would pay for, how many years, 35? 6 years of pension. Just the interest on that money. Okay, that's a lot of money. What they're offering us, from what I heard from the Premier 2 weeks ago, is $140 billion, which is less than half, and you know that's the way they operate. So the thing is that even at less than half, $140 billion is 25 years basically of guaranteed pension. Right? So our pension is secure, no matter what. And I'll tell you something else. That $9 billion that we're giving every year, we could give that 40% to our seniors. And just collect the interest on the 100, say even the 140 that they give us. Because they're saying that they're getting 9.9%. And being the cynic that I am, I totally understand that with insider trading, which they absolutely know a lot of things that we don't know about, I think they should be able to get 10% on that money easily. And they're saying that CPP is getting 9.9% now. So the pension is safe. So they're going to yell at you, they're going to tell you, oh, it's all nonsense. The pension is safe, absolutely safe. We won't live long enough to worry about it at any rate, but it will be safe. But look at us compared to everybody else, though. Look what we contribute to Canada Pension, like $53 billion compared to $12 billion on the other side, the people who receive it. So that's another thing about how unfair things are for Alberta. Equalization payments, $13 billion a year we give Quebec, and we get none. And because they cheat. How do they cheat? They don't put their Hydro-Quebec revenue on their balance sheets. So That would be like us not putting our oil revenue on our balance sheet. So you have to understand, that's not fair. So we're talking about fair and square here. And Doug Ford said today, if it's fair for Quebec, it should be fair for the rest of Canada. The Premier said yesterday, she said, we want what Quebec has. And I'll tell you what, the conversation's over. That's it. They give us what Quebec has, we're out of here. Because we'll never have to have a referendum for independence, because why would we? Look at that. And that's year after year. Supreme Court justices, 2 for Western Canada, Dennis alluded to this, 3 for Quebec, and they're guaranteed 3, by the way, and 3 for Ontario, 1 for the Maritimes, and they have to be bilingual. And if you don't think that's a big deal, think it through. Because if they have to be bilingual, it takes away about 90% of our lawyers, right? 90% of Western Canadian lawyers. So that means they have to come from French-speaking Canada, which is basically Quebec and New Brunswick, or, have moved from there. I mean, my grandparents are French-Canadian, and I speak both languages, but I sure as heck couldn't do it, in order to be a judge. I don't get enough practice. Nearly 3/4 of the Senate is appointed on Trudeau's advice. The Senate blocks anything that Parliament does if they choose to do it. That's the importance of the Senate. They're a safeguard. So if Parliament passes a bad rule, the senators are actually there to say, you know what, we won't let you do that. So how well has that system been working since 2020? Just saying. All right, Dennis alluded to this as well. New Brunswick has 10 Senate seats. Alberta and BC have 6. That's how many people, that line on the bottom is how many people it takes to get a Senate seat. So we take 740,000 people to get a Senate seat, and New Brunswick's about 100,000. So understand Confederation is working exactly the way they want it to work, or they would change it, right? And why are they not changing it? Because you saw the numbers. That's the beginning of it. It gets worse. This is what happens for MP seats. The Maritimes get 32, they got half our population. We got 37. That's the way they designed it. All right, this is very important. Whether you think this is very important or not, I know this is very important. You have to participate, you have to speak to power. If you want to change things, you have to get involved with your politics. There is no other way around it. If you don't take anything out of this tonight, just understand that you're responsible for where you are. You have to attend, you have to get on boards, you have to attend, but if you're not going to do all of that manner of stuff, and you're not going to run around the province talking to people, you have to attend the AGM of the party that's in power so that you can represent your views there. Because what happens if you do not is they really don't think you exist, and they need to railroad you and do what they want. Now just understand that right now the party in power is a UCP, and I'm a UCP chair, so I'm treading a thin line here. But the reason I became a UCP chair is exactly for what I'm telling you, because I knew I had to participate in government. Because unless you're talking to government, you can't make any change. And this should be a lifelong commitment. I'm sorry, but the reason we're here is because, and I am no better, I'm going to apologize to you right out of the gate. Till 4 years ago, I had nothing to do with politics. So I'm just telling you, but now it's time, things have changed. Things are not the same as they were before. And we're going to get into that right away. So the UCP AGM is November 28th. Because they're in power, I would encourage everybody to attend and represent your views. Yes or no? You will get a chance to vote on policy, you'll get a chance to vote on governance, and you will get a chance to make a difference. And you will see, once you're in the room, that when you vote with everybody in the room and you win, it's a good feeling. It makes you feel like you're actually accomplishing something. Because I've never attended an AGM until 3 or 4 years ago. When I started attending AGMs, we had the first one, there was like 1,600 people at it, and the year before it was like 800. And this is because we're pushing people to go to the AGM. The next year we had 3,800. And last year we had 6,500. And the government is noticing. And you know what they say? 3 years in a row. Calgary Herald walks up to me and says, hey, this does not represent the base of this party. Last year they said, this does not represent the base of this party. And so they come to me last year and they said, well, this cannot represent. I said, well, how many people do we have to get here so you guys understand that the people here are representing the base of the party? Like, honest to God, we went from 1,600 to 3,500 to 6,500. And Jason Kenney famously said, if this is my base, I want a new base. So we accommodated him. We really did. Honest to God. All right, last 10 years, let's have a look at what happened. And this is what we're talking about. The last 10 years, things changed. When Stephen Harper was in government, I was a happy guy. I wasn't caring anything about politics, even though he didn't get any pipelines. Trudeau got more pipelines than Harper. How does that grab you? Like, really? And that's the truth of it. So how does that work? Here's the problem. Anybody in the room ever hear of the Great Reset? Hands up. Okay. Does anybody believe that it's actually happening? Okay, good. Well, I'm going to share with you that it is actually happening. And this is what this is. Mr. Carney is a globalist. He's World Economic Forum. He's on the board of directors. He's been on the board of directors from day one. He doesn't hide it. So Mr. Trudeau actually laid the foundation for Mr. Carney. Believe it or not, old Justin that everybody thought was a buffoon, it turns out he wasn't such a buffoon. And I'm going to share that with you right now. He said to the New York Times in 2015, there is no core identity and no mainstream in Canada, and consequently that makes us the first post-national state, and that's one of the most important things you'll ever hear, because a post-national state is something that is different, first post-national state, that we don't know about. It is taking away the country status from everybody. A post-national state is after nation, and the definition of a post-national state is no borders. So that is what they're telling us they're going to do. So in actual fact, if that's actually the case, and it is, who's leaving Canada? Us or them? Like, really? And I mean, we're talking truth here as far as I'm concerned, and I want things to go back to where they were in 2014, realistically. All right. And here's where it starts. This is where this started. So Justin, the first thing he did, and one of the good things he did as far as they're concerned, in 1954, there was a statute in the Criminal Code of Canada that said it was illegal for media to lie to the public. All right? Illegal to lie to the public. So you had to say that to check their stories over and over again so they wouldn't go to jail. But in 2019, Bill C-39 was voted on and passed in Parliament to remove it, meaning they could lie to you. And how close to COVID is that? 2019, the year before. Now, I'm just going to ask you, do you think that's a coincidence? Whatever, whether it is or not, I'm not going to debate that. But what I'm telling you is this. The most important thing you can do if you want to control a population is control the message. Every tyrant does it. Everyone. Just go throughout history, it's like it's in lockstep. The playbook is amazingly the same for everybody. The first thing they do is control the message. Then, they don't want you talking to each other. And they don't want you sharing your opinion online. In the UK, some lady's paying a $25,000 fine for a post that she put online. And they're ahead of us. So understand that this is global. This is not just happening here. This is happening in the UK, this is happening in Australia, this is happening in New Zealand, this is happening in the Western world and in Europe. Trudeau said this when he's commenting on his open border immigration strategy, and open border means no borders, no nation. So that means people are free to move anywhere. So he said the very concept of a nation founded by European settlers is offensive to me. Old stock white Canadians are an unpleasant relic and quite frankly replaceable, and we will replace them. So what does he's telling you that they're weaponizing immigration. They're using immigration to replace our old stock white people. And it's costing us a tremendous amount of money for that to happen, right? They're bringing in 2 million immigrants a year, 2.4 this year, 2.4 million immigrants a year. So 2.4 immigrants, and I'm not against immigration because we need a certain level of immigration, but what's happening is they're bringing these people in faster than we can accommodate them. That's the problem. So we have to build in Edmonton every year, an infrastructure in Edmonton to accommodate these people. And they understand that. And they're doing it on purpose, because they told you just a while ago that they're building a post-national state. So the first thing in post-national state is no borders, and they're showing us that. This is the only thing I'm going to say about COVID. I think the Pfizer papers are required reading. They tried to bury these facts for 75 years, and they got pulled out. So I would suggest that, you know, if you want to know or want to know a perspective on what happened there, talk to them. The Alberta government minister admits COVID restrictions were all about political power and control. All right, Mr. Carney gets the keys from Justin. So what else did Justin do? During COVID, he printed $350 billion, doubled the money supply in Canada. So what's the consequence of that? The consequence of that is there's an inverse reaction. If you double the money, the value of the money halves. So that's basically the way it works, okay, like those within percentage points. So he printed $327 billion without an audit. Without an audit, and this is the FYI, Dave Hansen, my MLA, came into my office when we were on the path to fire Jason Kenney and asking for my help to do it, and he was telling me that if the government is within 10% of their budget, they don't look for the shortfall. So the budget for the province of Alberta at that time was $66 billion. So if it was within 10% of that, they wouldn't look for the $6.6 billion. And that's accepted practice at the time. That's a lot of money, right? That would make a big difference. But what happened is, by printing all that money, he created inflation. And he knew that he was going to create inflation. So what does inflation do? It reduces the value of your money, but your wages don't go up at the same rate as the reduction in the value of your money. And he printed that money like basically in months. So in those months, that period of time, the value of your money went down, say, let's just say 25 or 30%. But your wages didn't go up 25 or 30%, so you're less able to buy stuff, so you're basically poorer. And that's the point of it. And they understand that. They know that. I sincerely believe that banking establishments are more dangerous than standing armies. That's Thomas Jefferson. That's hundreds of years ago. So Mr. Carney is a banker. A world-famous banker. All right. Now here's the problem with not having a free and independent press. Mr. Carney basically wrote in a book, like Dennis said, that Western society is morally rotten and has been corrupted by capitalism. So that sounds pretty communist to me. And not only that, he goes on to say that to fix this requires rigid controls on personal freedom. That's a person that's Prime Minister of Canada telling us that he's going to put rigid controls on our movement and personal freedom. And then, the worst part of it is, right at the bottom, he said what Carney ultimately wants is a technocratic dictatorship, which is what? A technocratic dictatorship, in short form, is big business running government. So, that is what he's doing. And who is he in the scale of things? Brookfield is is $1 trillion hedge fund or business. It's $1 trillion business that he controls. And now he's restricting our freedoms. He's 60 days without due process for compensation, to seize and read your mail, track your online data without a warrant. Those are very basic freedoms. And then he wants to federal fast-track bills which allow cabinet to exempt favored companies from any federal law. So what he's saying there is he's going to get away from the consultation process. And he's going to be able to give these contracts to anybody he wants. So what do you think the odds are that he would give them to his friends? 100%. Okay, the 2035 gas ban, you know that by next year, it's going to be law that 20% of the vehicles that are sold have to be electric. That's 1 million in Alberta. You also know that we haven't got the infrastructure to plug those in every night and make them work. And you also know that in reality, they don't work. The cars don't work. They don't work when it's cold. And if you don't, lithium batteries don't work in the cold. In my store, I sell game cameras. And, they work all summer and into the fall till it gets cold. And you put these real expensive lithium batteries in there. In the summer, they last 6 or 8 months. In the wintertime, they last like 2 weeks. And cars, it'd be the same thing. And what do you do with all these old batteries after they don't work? At any rate, so they're really doing this. And Brookfield happens to be one of the companies in the world that produces those small nuclear reactors. So the odds are that the energy corridor that they're talking about is going to be these small nuclear reactors all the way down, because they're still talking about capping oil and gas. So if they're going to cap oil and gas, they have to have some alternative source of energy. So the premier, at a meeting in Bonneville, I had 800 people at $250 a plate that night. And I had the opportunity to have a hot stove with the premier. And she said, when I became premier, I thought I could fix everything in 6 or 7 months, but everything's broken. What does that mean at her level? That means that everything's too corrupt to fix. And it's pretty sad. And Mr. Carney has interests in 103 companies that could benefit if he stays prime minister. That is totally against the law. He should either be removed or he should be in jail. So how do you think that's going to influence the decisions that he makes? If every decision that he makes is going to enrich his own companies. Justin had 82 ethics violations. 82 ethics violations, including printing all that money. And there's no way to check, no checks and balances there. The last time an MP went to jail in Canada was in the 1920s. So does anybody believe that these people are above the law? We didn't elect kings. We didn't elect dictators. However, we have a chance to change that now. That's what we're talking about. We're talking about starting over. We're talking about a system that's not the Westminster system. The Westminster system is designed on honor. You know how they introduce them as the Right Honorable Justin Trudeau? And honorable means this, that if they embarrass the crown, they're supposed to resign. They're supposed to have honor. It's supposed to be on them to be honorable. Well, obviously, they don't believe that. And the system, because of that, is failing. We have to set checks and balances. We have to change the system. We cannot have government by the Westminster system. And we're going to come out with a constitution and ideas on what our new government is going to be, but I will share this with you. We believe that maybe we'd have to change the system to something that's more representative of people, a direct democracy like they have in Switzerland, or a republic like they have in the US, or a combination of both. Something that's going to be radically different from what we have now. Gilbo pulls the pin on an $11 billion Kitimat refinery project. Japan, Germany, and Greece came to Canada with their hat in their hand, and they said, I want you to sell us liquid natural gas. And our prime minister at the time said, no, it's not in our business plan. So what does that mean, really? That means we don't want to expand our liquid natural gas because we don't want to add the wealth to our economy so our people will stay poorer so that we can continue to do what we want to do. That's what that means. There's no other way it can mean anything else. If somebody walked into my store and said to me, you know what, Mitch, I'd like to buy $3 million worth of stuff a year for the next 35 years, I'd say, no, that's not in my business plan. How silly is that? Like, it's retarded. That's all I can tell you. It absolutely makes no sense. And how do we let these people get away with that? And you know who just picked that little contract up? It turned out to be a $750 billion contract. It was Donald Trump. He just picked that up like just within the last 3 weeks. So that $750 billion should have added to our economy, give jobs to our people, paid us for 50 years. But you know what they're doing instead? They're doing a carbon capture program. We're going to, you know why they do that? It gives them social license to produce oil. I was told this by an international banker. She said, you're buying social license to produce oil. So we have to adhere to green policy in order for us to get social license to produce our oil. And that's going to cost us $50 billion. And they're building it right now. They're doing it just north of Bonnyville. It's going to go from Fort McMurray to Bonnyville down to Elk Point, and it's going to dump that liquefied CO2 into the ground. And you know what the beauty of that is? It's not measurable. You can't measure how much difference it's making. It's just a beautiful plan. There's no measuring it. There's no anything. It's just, and the beauty of it for them is they can give the contract to anybody they want to give it to. And it's going to cost you and I $50 billion from our tax revenue. And, $50 billion is, right now, our budget's at $67, $68 billion a year. C-293 is a bill that will allow the government, in the case of the next emergency, to seize your land and your herd. No lie. And there's nothing you can do about it because we're going to put it into legislature. So back to slide 1, when I said that they create this thing so that they can plunder, and they're going to use this excuse that is an emergency and they have to take over your farm. So in the case of an emergency, it allows them to take away all your rights and freedoms. So if that's the case, are they more, is it beyond reason to think that they would create emergencies and tell you in their controlled media that we have an emergency? And because we can't talk to each other online, we can't even dispute it. And as a consequence, by 2035, you will own nothing and you will be happy. And I know I would have never said this 4 months ago until all this stuff started to come out. My face would have got red. I would have said, oh my God, that sounds so far out there, but I can't believe this is actually happening. But it's actually happening. They hit us with a tariff on canola 3 days ago. Do you know why? Because we tariffed a Chinese electrical car. A $10,000 Chinese electrical car that they didn't want to bring into Canada because it would hurt our car producers in the East. And by tariffing it, it's going to end up having a selling price of around $100,000 here so that our guys can compete. So the Chinese, who did they punish? The West. Right? They punished our guys. They punished our producers. 75% tariff on canola and peas. Just announced a few days ago. Dennis went into this. This is about oil cap. We're producing more oil than anybody. He also went into C-69 where that was approved. The Supreme Court ruled in our favor on Bill C-69, and they totally ignored it. Again, lawless. Tanker ban in the West only. Understand 500,000 barrels of oil go down to St. Lawrence and get delivered to the East a day. So they're blocking oil and gas investment.
Comparison of countries with the highest oil production.
Let's go back here before we start that. This is going to be a salient moment in this presentation, and I'm going to tell you why. Because we're going to see how much oil Canada produces and how much oil Norway produces. I want you to pay very close attention to how much oil. This is about the top 40 oil-producing nations in the world. I'm going to cut this down in half, and I'll get it down to the 20. But right for tonight, we've got the top 40. And just look at how much oil these countries are producing and who they are. Okay?
Comparison of countries with the highest oil production.
So these are barrels per day. So that's 70,000 barrels a day, 75,000 barrels a day for Syria. France produces 80,000 barrels a day. So notice how many of these countries don't produce much oil. Just pay attention to that. So Vietnam produced 187,000 barrels of oil a day, which is a surprise to me, but apparently that was one of the reasons for the Vietnam War. The Arab countries there. Egypt, Azerbaijan. We're at 25. We're not seeing Canada yet. Venezuela is an oil-producing country, but they only produce 761,000 barrels a day. Number 19 is Oman at 1 million barrels a day. African countries. Qatar got some of that natural gas thing that they do 1.8 million barrels a day. All right, there's Norway. Pay attention. 2 million barrels a day. Kuwait, 2.9 million. Canada's not there yet. Notice we produce more oil than Iran, United Arab Emirates. Very, very rich places. More than Iraq. More than China. There we are, 5.6 million barrels a day, actually 5.7. Russia, 10 million, double what we do, basically. Saudi, 11 million. And finally, that's the USA, 20 million barrels a day. All right. So the point of that is this. Here's the point of that. Alberta has no oil fund. Norway came to Alberta 30 years ago to study our oil patch and the money involved. And the sad news about this thing is that they have $1.3 trillion in an oil fund, and we're $100 billion in debt. And what's even sadder is that's an old slide. They actually have $2 trillion in our oil fund right now. So I'm going to ask you a question. Where's the money? And we produce 2.5 times more oil than Norway. They produce 2 million barrels a day. We're at 5.6 million. And Alberta produces 87% of that 5.6 million, so it puts us at 4.6 million. So literally 2 and a bit times more than Norway. Where's the money? And are we okay with it? That's basically the crux of this whole conversation. I mean, it's all right there. I mean, there's more to it, but I mean, if it's all about money, if it stayed here, if they used it to benefit our people, if it helped us, if we could, if our health care was better, if all the rest of that stuff, like, I've had friends that work in the United Arab Emirates, and their health care is like out of this world, like 10 times better than ours. And they produce less oil than us. And they don't have agriculture. They don't have forestry. They don't have many minerals like we got. And they import our people to do the work, which is why I know this. So they have $2 trillion in an oil fund. So the interest on that, on 2,000 billion, is 200 billion, which is enough to, just the interest on that, is enough to run the province of Alberta with absolutely no tax of any kind with a $50 billion a year surplus. No taxes of any kind. Any kind. And that's what we're dealing with. And Dennis talked about the production cap, how many jobs it's going to cost us, and this investment leaving the country, same thing. All that's designed to do is those policies stop investment, but understand that investment did happen somewhere else. But they're stopping it from happening here. There's only one reason for that, because they want you to stay poor, or they want to make you poorer. There's no way that there's any other reason for it. And here's my second favorite slide of the whole thing. The carbon tax has cost Canadians billions of dollars over 5 years, hurting the economy while reducing CO2 emissions by 11.9 gigatons. China emits 11.9 gigatons of CO2 every day and a half. Every day and a half. And they're stopping our economy based on that. Why isn't China concerned about climate change? Because they already have a communist government, and that's the problem. That's what we have to be afraid of. We have to be afraid that this is happening here. And we have to be aware that it's a possibility that it could happen here, and we have to make sure that it doesn't. I believe that if they could have it that way, it would already be that way. Forest fires right now, out of 111 forest fires in Manitoba, 100 are caused by people. 97% of the CO2 produced is naturally produced. So 3% becomes 100% of the carbon that they're trying to change the pattern of or eliminate. So that 3% becomes 100%, and we're 1% of that 100% is what we produce here in Canada. So all that for that. So it's a lie. And here's the taxes. That's my favorite slide. So understand that you only get taxed on your tax return. You say, well, I don't get taxed that much because it doesn't come off my check. What comes off your check is 20-some% or whatever that is. But all these taxes are hidden. GST is not hidden. You know, you see GST, you go to the pump, the gas pump, and what's gas? $1.35 a liter. Basically, 40% of that is tax. So here's the taxes that we pay. Carbon tax, personal income tax, corporate income tax, goods and services tax, excise taxes, fuel excise tax, alcohol excise duty, tobacco excise duty, cannabis excise duty, excise duties other than those, customs duties, air traveler security charge, luxury tax, provincial territorial tax, capital gains tax, land transfer tax, media tax, regulation tax, CPP tax, and business tax. And do you know anything about estate tax? So they tell you it's for the rich. So when you die, you're probably going to be worth $1.5 million or better. And if you have a house involved and you want to hand it to your kids, if you pay $200,000 for it and it's worth $700,000 after you pass away, there's a 65% tax on the $500,000 difference on the state tax. So they don't want your kids to have it either. So understand that all this tax that makes up the 43 or 44% that we're talking about is all of those taxes that you pay on your everyday transactions that wouldn't be there if we eliminated them. How big a deal would it be for farmers if we took the carbon tax out? Because there'd be a carbon tax, no carbon tax on fertilizer, no carbon tax on their fuel, no carbon tax on anything. It'd be a massive deal. Where's that money go anyway? Green projects. All right. So this is the other thing that's happening. Because you have to work harder and because you have less money, our women can't have as many kids. And that's their plan too. Because we can't afford to have them. 2 kids, 3 tops. And because the women have to work so that so you can pay your bills. That's totally the way it is. I don't believe any of this is coincidence. I believe this is all laid out. And they're showing it to us as they work. In 1950, 50% of Canadians could afford a home by a married couple by the time they're 30. Today, it's 12%. Audit of $187 billion worth of liberal infrastructure spending finds 20,000 missing projects. Do you think there's money missing? I want to ask you a question. Did anybody go to jail? Does anybody know about it? What's this? Foreign aid. Why are we giving foreign aid to Iraq? $1.08 billion. If they offered you $1.08 billion as a leader of Iraq and they said, give me $500 million back, what do you think you would do? Just saying. I don't know if that's happening. I'm just saying that as a possibility. Trudeau gave $11 billion on overseas gender programs during his tenure. Okay, last thing, guns. October 1st, ladies and gentlemen, is the day they're coming for your guns. That is the day that they set. That's the line in the sand. If you own a restricted weapon on October 1st and you don't turn it in and sell it, you will become a criminal. They will be able to come to your house and get your guns. And that means anything that's on that restricted list now. That involves a lot of semi-automatic shotguns, bird guns, I'm a gun dealer. I sell guns. I've been selling guns for 48 years. I totally understand the rules. So here's the reason they want to take your guns, so you can't protect yourself. I should read you a text I got today from a local farmer. He said they're stealing his gas, they're stealing his parts, they're creating havoc, they're chasing them down the road. The cops are telling them if they chase them down the road, they're going to charge them for chasing them down the road. And they're calling the police, and they're not getting any help. And imagine if they didn't have guns in their house to protect themselves. And I'm just saying, they don't have to protect themselves. They haven't had to protect themselves because people understand that there's a possibility that they're there. Doug Ford got his house broken into, and he says now that you should be allowed to shoot criminals who break into your house. That's Castle Doctrine. We tried to get Castle Doctrine into the Alberta Bill of Rights last year, but the Premier thought that it was a little excessive. And there is that school of thought. But if I think that at my age, if there's people in my house in the middle of the night and they broke in, I don't want to be arm wrestling with any 30-year-old. Just saying. 35 years ago, I would have had no problem with that. But right now, I'm in a different situation. So I understand that. So what do the communists do? All political power comes from the barrel of a gun. The Communist Party must command all the guns. That way, no guns can ever be used to command the party. And they're coming for our guns. What's the worst case scenario? That's the way I always look at things in business. What's the worst thing that could happen? The worst thing that could happen is they take your guns and you can't defend yourself. That's the worst thing that could happen. Do you know that the average registered gun owner in Canada is four times less likely to commit a murder than the average Canadian citizen? Not criminal, than the average Canadian citizen. So what I'm telling you is the gun owners are not the problem. No matter how they try and slice and dice that and make you complain that it's safer, it's not safer for people not to have guns. As a matter of fact, I'll take it a step further, 2 slides to go. A well-regulated militia. Now, in a free and independent Alberta, I talked about the Swiss system. The Swiss send their 16, 17-year-old boys to school to be trained to become soldiers. And I believe the girls are involved now at this point. And they leave basic training, trained to be soldiers, with their automatic weapon, and they take it home. And that's been going on for 50, 60, 80 years there. So there's an automatic weapon in every home in Switzerland with a trained soldier in it as well. The crime rate is very, very low in Switzerland. So and this is what the Americans wrote into their bill, into their Constitution, after they fought the British, the strongest nation in the world, and won. They said that a well-regulated militia being necessary to the security of a free state, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. Because good people need to have guns too. And that's what I believe a free and new Alberta, that would be included in our Constitution as well. And the only person coming to save you is the version of yourself that's tired of your current situation. Thank you very much. All right, we're going to do Q&A. So if anybody wants to do Q&A, ask questions, Dennis and I will be up here to answer them. Anything you like, we can make it as long or as brief as you like, and we'll be here to answer questions after if you want to come and talk to us if you're too shy to ask a question.
I just have one thing. This lovely gentleman here has been doing all the recording. If you want to know where to find that video, take a picture of those orange signs, and that will give you where to go to get, to be able to watch it or to share it.
All right, I'm going to answer the landlocked question. I'm going to answer the landlocked question before it's asked, because it's asked every night. We are policy locked, not landlocked. We are landlocked right now, so everybody understands that. That's not going to change. But what will change is that we can tariff anything that comes across our border from either direction. So we know that BC has the biggest container port in Canada, and that they send all the stuff that comes west, that has to go through Alberta to go east, comes through Alberta. So we could tariff all of that in exchange for a pipeline. So it's that simple. If we were not able to do that now because of the fact that, oh, sorry, I got to get close to you, Dennis. All right, here we go. So We can't do that now because it's against federal law. But if we became an independent country, we would be able to have the leverage to take care of that, and then we could send our oil to the coast.
Thank you. Okay, so my question is just regarding the Forever Canadian petition.
Yes,
So Thomas
Lukaszak.
thank you, was stating today that what he's done prevents any of this from happening if they get the referendum for 5 years. What is the legalities in that?
Well,
Yeah, let me explain it. So there's a couple of key points here. The question that Mr. Lukaszak has posed is a question on policy or legislation. So what does that mean? His question is do you agree that Alberta should stay in Canada, fundamentally? Now, the legislation is this. You can pose a policy or legislative question, which is very different from a question to change the Constitution. We're proposing a question to change the Constitution. His proposal would obligate, not necessarily obligate, but would suggest to the provincial government that the provincial government should change its bylaws such that you couldn't hold a referendum on Alberta sovereignty in the future. That's what he's trying to accomplish, okay? It's very different from what we're doing, and what we're doing is we've submitted a question that would require a change to the Constitution, i.e. removing Alberta from the Constitution. So what we also know, and many of you in the audience may already know this, but the provincial government is currently working with us because they want our question to go forward. And you could ask the question, well, why do they want our question to go forward? They want our question to go forward because they want the leverage to deal with the federal government that they could have with that successful referendum. So Mr. Lukaszak has a requirement to collect 300,000 signatures in 90 days, okay? We'll see if he's successful. This is much harder than he thinks to achieve. But even if he is successful in getting the petition, the provincial government can say, well, we're not going to hold a referendum on that question. And since they're working with us, the implication is that they won't hold a referendum on a question that costs a lot of money that doesn't change anything. You see what I'm saying? So don't worry about that. We're not particularly worried about that. Even the judge has said, with respect to Mr. Lukaszak's question, that that's a, what term did he use? A nothing burger, yeah. He said his question is a nothing burger. So it's even relatively irrelevant in the court. The only reason that we're dealing with an issue with the court right now is, does the question pose a problem with sections 1 through 35.1 of the Canadian Constitution, which deals with individual rights, okay, freedoms and rights, and it deals with Aboriginal issues, okay? So we'll see what happens with the court proceedings, but we're pretty confident that we're going to be okay. Mr. Lukaszak's question doesn't affect us, and it can't affect us.
Okay, so this is probably the most important thing that's happening here, is we have a chance to, if our question gets approved, we're going to have a referendum for independence. There's no question we're going to do it. Okay, so because they know that. The provincial government knows that as well. So it's my job to look for a troll under every rock. So the way I see this is if the provincial government actually wanted this citizen's petition to go ahead, they wouldn't have put that loophole in there. So I'm not sure that the provincial government is installing this on purpose. The point of the Citizens Initiative Act is so that the citizens can ask a question and have it voted on without any interference from government. So the MLAs who don't have the courage to do it, or put it through, even though they think that it's possibly the right thing to do, can put it to the people, and then the people can decide and take all of the pressure off of government. So that's the point of the Citizens Initiative Act. And that's what direct democracy is all about. That's what we're talking about in the Swiss system. So the people get to vote. And in Switzerland, they get to vote twice a year on multiple things. And the threshold has been reduced now. I'm going to give the Premier credit for this. It started out at 600,000, and we're down to 177,000, which is why this is going to be, I'm not saying it's a slam dunk, but it's very close to a slam dunk as far as we're concerned, because we have 250,000 people that have pledges, and we know where they live, and they said they'd sign it. So we're hoping to get 1 million signatures out of that, not just 177,000. But the whole thing is that there's so many things in play here with the dynamics of this. The judge is actually taking a stance that is going to, and our argument is, until the question's approved, that's all Clarity Act stuff that gets dealt with after. And it's supposed to be dealt with after, and that's according to the Canadian Constitution. So we believe we have a very good chance to win that, based on that alone. So is Mr. Lukaszyk's question relevant? Not as far as we're concerned, because they say they can run together. Because his question is a policy question, and our question is a constitutional question, so therefore there are two different areas of that Citizens Initiative Act, so we can run them concurrently. Okay? If that helps.
Clarification, one quick follow-up. Where do I find these slides?
My slides?
Yeah.
You just have to come and ask me after, and I'll help you out.
Thank you.
Oh, Max has got them.
No, you can always get the video. They'll be on the video.
I wasn't going to come tonight because I was at the one in Fort Saskatchewan, which was very good, because I thought, well, it's just going to be the same thing, but it's not. And I appreciate it. You guys are always updating your information. What really stood out to me was the video or the graphic about the oil production of the different countries.
Yes.
So you said we were like fifth?
Fourth, I believe.
Fourth.
Yeah.
And that's current production.
Yes.
Right? So that's current production. What is what is capable production, I guess? Where would that put us? Like the oil in the ground in Alberta or Canada, I'll put it that way. Where would that put us in that market?
We're third in the world in oil reserves.
Okay.
So we could produce as much oil if we could sell it as Saudi. Like we could double oil production. And that's not in our value of freedom document. Our value of freedom document is status quo, and I made sure that it was not only status quo, it wouldn't account for the eventual boom that would happen if our people had 30% more money to spend. Because we decided that we better not account for that, because the whole world is going to call us out on this. We looked at this and studied this. The stats came from Stats Canada. This is very doable. We will be very much better off. And also, understand there's a differential on that oil production. So I don't know if you understand that, but we sell our oil about 18% cheaper than world price to the U.S. And that's part of that, where that money is. That differential is what they call it, differential. And it's, the Americans are benefiting greatly from that, because they put that oil, Bonneville produces 37% of Alberta's oil. So the oil goes in, say, in Cold Lake, and the next day it's in Chicago, and they made 18% on that, right? Because it just goes down that pipe, and that's a hell of a good deal. But if we have a pipeline we'll be going west to China, Thailand, all those places that need natural gas and oil, we can actually bargain with the Americans and say, look, we'll just sell it to them instead of selling it to you for that price. Our oil is heavy oil, though, and you need special refineries for it, and they're not everywhere. So Texas has one, and that's where it's going. So our oil is heavy oil, so it's different. Actually, it's better for making all the things that we wear, and flooring and asphalt and all that, than actually sweet Texas crude. So our oil is actually beneficial. It has more advantages to it.
There are over 6,000 products that emanate from a barrel of oil. And like I said earlier, we're losing $26.5 billion, according to the Frontier Center for Public Policy, every year because we can't get our oil to international markets. One other thing, just in that value of freedom document, the very last section is a projection of what could happen when we double our oil and gas production. And that's fun to read as well. When you make a projection, you don't really know exactly how things are going to turn out. But if that projection it's rather conservative, but it's the latter part of the document. So it's a slog getting through the first part of it, but the latter part is kind of fun because it's more speculative.
I've always appreciated the leadership of the APP, but Mitch, you're like jet fuel. And your level of detail is really quite incredible. So it's very encouraging. And
thank you very much.
Thank you for all the leadership.
I was actually told yesterday, I thank you very much for that, but somebody said that we look like amateur hour. And I said, well, maybe we do, but we are. We're just regular people. And so I thank you for that. Ordinary people, yes.
I wasn't going to come here today, but thanks
Yeah.
to my father, I did, and
Good.
I've learned a lot of things. I'm very political. I'm in my school's political group, hoping to become the president of the Model UN Club next year. My question is, how vital is the youth vote? Because right now in Edmonton, they're liberalizing us to just pounding in on us over and over. And my teacher has said Alberta could not survive sovereignly.
Oh.
But I know for a damn fact that is true. That is true. We could survive.
Oh, yeah.
So how vital is the youth vote?
Oh, it's hugely vital. But I'm going to share with you, you're younger than the people that I get to talk to most of the time, but I have 5 kids. And my kids are from 29 now to 42, 43 years old. They all work in the oil, the 2 of them work in the oil field industry, one's a lawyer, but that's not the point. But the kids that work in the oil field, 100% of their crews, like 300, 400, 500 people in the camps that they're in support this. Like this, there's a lot of people that support this that are in the middle of this, that are quiet people that just don't generally talk about it. If you want to organize a meeting with your political club, let me know. I will attend. I will go talk to you. I will go in person. Or I'll send my much better half, Dr. Modry here, who happens to live in Edmonton, and he would absolutely be pleased to do that. We will go talk to you in person, one-on-one, I promise.
Thank you.
Okay, good.
I don't know if I understood you right, but I thought you were saying that even if we become a sovereign state, we still would retain our Canadian citizenship?
That's correct.
Okay, and the reason why I'm asking for this is, of course, I get CPP, and I also have a federal pension.
Yes.
So one of my biggest concerns is, could Canada hold it kind of as a hostage and in any way stop paying us? So I'd be 6 months where I have no income, which would not be a good thing, but I mean, not that I don't agree with what you guys are saying.
So it's on us to have a line of credit. So we're going to get a line of credit established so that in day 1 to whenever we start collecting all this money, that we can take care of all of our people. So we're going to arrange for a big line of credit based on the money that we will be getting. I really believe that that's going to be a necessary step. And I'm actually meeting with the Premier on Wednesday night of next week, a one-on-one. And I know she hasn't discussed this or she hasn't thought about this at all because she's still pumping Team Canada. Until how long has she got, did she say? She gave us 6 months, 3 months ago, so she's going to be done before the AGM. So just FYI, that's another reason to attend, to hold her feet to the fire and make sure that she does what she says she's going to do. Because the reason we started this, I'm going to tell you why this all got started. I was chair of the APP when this got started because the Premier said, if they... What's that? Oh, no, yeah, no, I was APP too as well at the time. When she said that if they don't do this, it's going to affect national unity. Right? She said that. So what does that mean? That means if Carney doesn't follow up on his promises, we're going to leave. And I thought that meant that she was going to help us do it. But she kind of changed her mind there somewhere along the way. So we're still continuing down that path because we believe it's the only option. And as far as that kind of stuff is concerned, federal pensions, they have to pay you if you're a Canadian citizen. There's no way they cannot do it. I don't believe there's a court in the land that would allow them to get away with that.
And what about for military defense? Like, let's say if we do become our own sovereign state or whatever, what are we going to do for military? Will we have our own military
That's the plan. It's in the plan. We're going to $3.5 billion a year, 3.5% of GDP is going to go towards protection. All right? Okay.
Here's something that when you're talking to people who have no interest in Alberta sovereignty, they say they're a Canadian citizen. I'm a Canadian citizen. I'm going to stay in Alberta, and I'm not supporting sovereignty. Well, you know what? If you can do that. There's no question about it. But if you take out Alberta citizenship, here's the difference. As a Canadian citizen without Alberta citizenship, you can pay Canadian taxes. As an Alberta citizen, you don't have to pay federal taxes or any other of those sorts of taxes. So it's an interesting sort of discrepancy between the two.
You can choose, though, right?
Yeah, you'd be able to choose.
You'll be able to choose.
Yeah.
If you become an Alberta citizen, you'll be able to choose not to pay Canadian tax. All right.
Because you can be a dual citizenship.
Of
you
course.
Can have dual citizen.
Yeah, of course. And then you declare which country you want to declare your taxes, how you want to be taxed.
And then to add to that, CPP really, if it's an in and an out. If you contributed, you will receive.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter where you live, because I have family that lives in the United States and collects. I have family that lives in Italy and collects.
Yeah, exactly.
And that would not change.
Hi, last question.
Sure. Oh, sorry. Maybe this is just kind of like a hypothetical, but I'm just sort of wondering, the government changes the goalposts all the time.
Of course.
Like, there is nothing that's ever been consistent. All of your research and data has shown that. Our life experience has now shown us that. Like, I'm worried for my kids.
Me too.
If this isn't something, I want this to go forward so much. I'm just really afraid something's going to happen that's going to, the government's just going to all of a sudden, the legislation that you're waiting for in the next 3 months, like I think there was something you were waiting for on August 14th, and then that was a no that came through, and now it's like, great, we got to wait another 3 months.
Till November 18th.
Yeah, not surprising, not surprised at all that happened, but like, if it just continues to get delayed and delayed and delayed, the economy isn't going to handle this.
No, it's not. It's going downhill every day.
Yes.
So here's the problem. You miss every shot you don't take. And honestly, I really don't think we have a choice no matter what. I really don't think we have a choice. We're just going to have to accept what they give us or say we're not going to, and we may have to deal with the consequences early. But and I don't believe that you can take the richest part and the engine of a country out of the country without a big fight. I'm not naive enough to believe that we're just going to sail into the sunset and that's going to happen. I'm also not naive enough to believe that there's not a lot of people that they would like to get out of the road. Just saying. And people that are standing in front of people every day preaching against them may be those people. But I understood that coming in. So just saying that the whole thing is this. You're not going to fight a war without firing a bullet. And the other thing I know, that once the first bullet is fired, the game plan is going to change. And we're nimble enough to change. We understand that we're going to be in a fight. We understand what's at stake. We understand that we're all in. And we understand that we're going to, and the other thing we understand is that we're doing it for our people and our future and our kids, and we're not going to leave anybody behind, including the Aboriginals, even though they don't think that that's the case. And the unfortunate part, to me, really, from my perspective, is we're going to do all this work, get all this gain, and all the people that are against us are going to get just as much value out of it as everybody else, right? And for sure, the one thing I know about socialists is they want more money. That's the golden rule with them. Socialism works until you run out of other people's money. And so the whole thing I understand exactly what's going on. And I also understand how hard this is going to be. And I also understand it, but on the other side of that, just like we're talking, like we're having a casual conversation between you and I in a private room here, I'm wondering how come, where are they? Like right now. It's been bothering me for a little while. And actually somebody brought it up to me the other day. They said, well, we're not hearing much from the other side, save Thomas Lukaszuk stuff. And I mean, and Thomas is basically promoting socialism. Like, no matter how you slice that, that's what he's doing. So I don't know. It's hard for me to understand as a business person. But my wife said something, and I'm going to give the mic to Dennis in 1 minute. She told me one day, and it was totally something that I had never, ever thought about. She said, you know, there's people out there that are okay with owning nothing and being happy. And she said, you'd probably be surprised, there's quite a lot of them. So that's the mentality that we have to fight. One last comment. Sorry, Dennis. I can't let this go because I'm on a little bit of a roll here. The people that are going to be coming to Alberta because of this are going to be people that think like us. And there's going to be an exodus of people that don't think like us. And the beauty of it is that real estate's probably going to become very valuable here in Alberta. So the people that are leaving will actually be able to vacate and leave with a fair amount of money and go live where they want. And I'm not sure that they will. But the whole thing is that people coming in, and we're going to have to control immigration, just so you understand that that's a part of it. So here, I'll let Dennis finish that.
All right, so I don't want anybody to be discouraged because here are some facts that you're going to love. For one thing, government can change. Provincial government I'm referring to, okay? The UCP Board of Directors, 100% minus one person who's soft on it, but almost the entire UCP Board of Directors is in support of Alberta sovereignty. There are some 50 to 60,000 members of the UCP. 65% of them are in support of Alberta sovereignty. We have over 250,000 people. We have the ability to influence what happens at the level of constituency associations to replace CA boards, to replace MLAs that are not in support of Alberta sovereignty. So depending on how things go, we're not backing down. We will take control if we have to. And that's an important point to understand. And let me just point out one other thing, polling. Polling is an interesting animal. We've had the question posed to us, how accurate is the polling? And I'm going to tell you this, it may not be very accurate. And I'll tell you why, because we still live in cancel culture, right? Best example is the US election. Nobody predicted, the polls didn't predict a Trump Republican massive win. And look at what happened in Canada with respect to the trucker convoy and cancel culture. People had their accounts frozen, right? Now here's a bit of a thought exercise that you can think about in terms of the probability that we may already have a plurality in favor of Alberta sovereignty. And I think this is making the socialists extremely nervous. That 2021 referendum on ending equalization, 62% of Albertans voted to end equalization, right? How many of that 62%, knowing that the only way to end equalization would be for Alberta to become a sovereign country, would therefore vote in favor of sovereignty? Our polling tells us that we're closer to a plurality than a lot of people think. So be encouraged by that, but spread the message and work with us. We don't lead this. You folks are the populist movement. You're the ones that have to take this home, right? You got to swing for the fences and win, and that's it. Ladies and gentlemen, collectively, from Mitch and I, and from the bottom of my cardiac surgical heart, thank you very much for coming, and safe driving.
I'm just going to hold it for a second. I know you've been here a long time. To make this move forward, possibly, we have to collect signatures, right? You, as a body of people, if you feel led and want to, we need canvassers. And people think that's going to be just door to door, everybody's got to walk door to door. No. We're going to try to get places like this and even just rent the entry. And emails will go out to people who have already signed the pledge to intent to sign, and the emails will go out and say, go to the new Sarepta Hall on this date between these hours, and we're hoping to catch probably about 75% of the people coming to you. And then whoever does this, then you will have a list and maybe have to drive to a few neighbors and go pick up their signatures. So it's just initially collecting the signatures for those we already know are going to say yes. So if you are interested, there is a separate sheet at the back the girls know. Name and address. I will contact you, not tomorrow, sometime next week, and I will put your stuff in and we'll get stuff rolling. But that's what we need, our canvassers. And people think, oh, I can't do door to door. You don't have to. We're going to bring people to you. So if you don't want to be a canvasser, maybe you've got a business or an empty somewhere and you can say, hey, you know what? I'm just going to stand up and they can come and sit in my front office. And because we need spaces too. If the weather's nice, we can put up a tent like Kelly Kazak's doing. But if it's February, sorry, I'm out. For the tenting thing, not doing that. So thank you all so much for coming. What else did I miss? Where to find, I already did that. Take a picture of the orange thing on the wall. Thank you, Max. I am just thrilled by tonight's turnout, so thank you all so much. It was very heartwarming. Stack a chair, or just, we can't really stack the chairs because they get hung. So bring a chair if you're able. Thank you. Where'd you want?